All right, hello everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Femi Odunuga. My remit at Mastercard is to be the Senior Vice President of a function we call Digital Future within the Products and Innovation team. I think it's better now. I can hear myself now. All right, great. Hello everyone, yeah. So a couple of things to note before we jump right in. When I introduce myself typically and I talk about digital future, people tend to wonder what does that really mean. So I'll try to explain that in very short terms, right? So I joined MasterCard not too long ago, and the big part of my remit is to essentially take a look at what the future would hold for commerce. Very quickly we learned that that's not an easy task. It has nothing to do with how smart you are, how intelligent you are, but it's just the toughest thing, one of the toughest things in the world. But I'll take about 20 minutes or so thereabouts to just talk through the trends we're seeing in the space, the technologies, and how those are shaping the future of commerce. It's a tough stage to be on right now, given the performances that just happened, and also you just had lunch, so I will try to do my possible best to keep you engaged for the next 20 minutes. So as part of the proof points that predictions are hard, this was from Steve Ballmer, who most of us already know, a big name in the tech world. This was one of his early statements before the iPhone came out, and he said, there is no chance the iPhone is going to get any traction. Essentially, nobody's going to use the iPhone. But we all know now, fast forward to today, we know that's not true. More interestingly, is one of our favorite guys, Steve Jobs. He said, look, the subscription model of buying music is bankrupt. It's not going to work. People have to buy CDs or download music. So he believed very heavily in iTunes. But now today, Spotify essentially has taken market share. Apple is going the way of subscriptions. And one of the most interesting ones for me is this prediction by New York Times in the 60s and 70s when the television was just coming up. Essentially, they made a declaration saying, look, the television will never take over from radio when it comes to advertising and marketing. Nobody has time to sit in front of the television. But now we discover that that's not true at all either. And these are all very smart people, very well accomplished people in their different fields. Essentially, the point here is predicting the future is hard. So what we try to do at MasterCard and within my group is essentially take a view of what the trends are today and the technologies that are shaping the future and try to make informed guesses, so to speak. But rather than just guessing, we also try to create the solutions for the marketplace. So where are we today? I'll dig right in. And I know this is day 2, so you probably have heard a number of these things, so I won't drain the slides too much. But essentially where we are today can simply be put at, a seismic shift across different areas, right? So whether it's consumer trends are changing, technologies are fast evolving, governments and the macroeconomics are changing. I'll start with consumers, for example. The consumers of today are fundamentally different from those from 5-10 years ago. Very, very different, right? Consumers want choice, they want control, they want privacy. Back in the day, the message was you need to give consumers many options to choose from, a range of different things to look at. But today, it's more like, look, simplify my life. I don't want a million things, right? And the data shows this as well. So the number of apps in the App Store is increasing, but the number of apps per user is actually dropping on a day-to-day basis because people are looking for ways to simplify their lives, right? The consumers of today as well are hyper-connected, right? I can't see the crowd very well, but I can guarantee that at least 30 or 40% of us, of those of us in the audience, are on our phones right now, whether taking pictures or sending messages or just connecting. So there's hyper-connectivity of the consumers. I think a big part of what's happening, though, is a shift in demographics. The demographics are fundamentally changing. Now, if you think about it, everyone talks about the millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z versus the boomers, but the preferences of that demographic, which is what will drive the future, has changed fundamentally. We like to say in simple terms that, look, if you want to get a product in market that's a hit, make it as simple as possible, and essentially build it for lazy people or make people lazier, and you will have a winner. And people tend to laugh, but if you think about innovation across board, even from the days of the remote control, for example, the main thing about a remote control, the simple remote control, is that you don't have to stand up. Because humans, by nature, we would rather just sit. We're more comfortable sitting in bed, doing everything. So think about all the innovations you've seen so far. Consumers are drawn towards things that make life easy for them, or draws them, make it simpler. We'd like to say it reduces their cognitive load so they don't have to think about it or process much, and also the physical load, they don't have to get up, right? So a lot of things are changing in that space. People want personalized service. They don't want a range of options anymore. People are spending hours on the phone, on devices, on mobile devices. And the population, the Gen Z population, are starting to grow, right? They are increasing. They are the ones that are now entering the workforce and the ones that are determining what the future of commerce would look like. So if we go to market with the same old solutions that were meant for the past, it really won't work. I had a funny situation happen. I hosted a family during the summer in New York, and one of the things I discovered was that historically, grandma and the kids always had a problem. And I don't know if this is a cultural thing or not, but my mom would sit in front of a TV, and she would call Daniel to come from upstairs to come change the channel for her. So she would scream out, "Daniel, come," and he shows up, and he's like, "Grandma, just press this and press that." And she's like, "Well, the remote is so confusing." But now that we all have voice-enabled devices, he just came and told her, "Look, Ma, just say, Alexa, change it to CNN." And she did that, and suddenly Grandma and Daniel get along much better, just because of technology and just because things are easier. So as we define solutions, we start looking at the Gen Zs as a core demographic, but even the older demographic as well also want this ease and this convenience that we think is normal, but for them, it's like the default and the norm. So moving right along to the next thing that's changing is enterprises. Businesses fundamentally are starting to change. One of the questions I like to ask people is around this whole nature of borderless industries, and that's a big change we're seeing in the space. And people ask me, what does that mean? And I always say, look, no company really lies in one industry anymore, especially with tech coming into play. And I ask a question, what industry does, say, Amazon play in? Anybody have an answer? Anybody has a suggestion? What industry does Amazon play in? Some people will say e-commerce. Some people will say logistics. Some would say, what's it called? Transportation. Sometimes it's food, right? Sometimes it's groceries. So, but the truth is, and also they're now very into healthcare and the likes. But if you think about the biggest players in industry today, they really are not playing in just one sector. They are playing across multiple sectors without having to do a lot to move into those sectors. So if you think about the rate of growth for most tech companies, and even other companies as well, being driven by technology, it's fundamentally changing everything. They don't need to hire as many people as they needed before because the gig economy is taking over the world, right? So the projection is that by 2030, 200 million gig workers would essentially be in the workforce, which essentially represents about 40% of the global workforce. So enterprises are changing as well, right? Cross-border initiatives are also there. And then automation comes into play. When you layer in automation and en masse, it's starting to change the nature of business by itself from the ground up. And then on the broader scale, let's look at the macroeconomic trends. Like, what are the things that are happening in the macro scale, right? We're seeing a lot of governments now getting involved in digital activism. So their premise is not so much as, look, we just care about, whether it's just interest rates and the likes. Now they're actively part of like making rules and regulations around digital and around digitization. A lot of them are actually trying to make legislation around data privacy and protections. Open banking is a big part of all this, which essentially would open the terrain of banking to startups, but not just startups, to other industry players as well that want to offer banking services without being a bank. Another interesting thing that's happening is the binary nature of the world, right? So we tend to always talk about the West and China. So the world essentially seems like it's looking into like two different types of worlds. So the internet in China is actually starting to grow actively. Like it's not even starting to grow, like there are billions of users there. And it's essentially taking over the West, right? And the nature of the internet there and the internet in the West is fundamentally different. So we need to kind of find the middle ground and the amalgamation of these things coming together. So governments are playing an active role. And last but not least is emerging markets. So globally speaking, I think there's about, right now we're looking at about 1.1 billion people that are excluded from financial services. that want to get into the market. And we see the growth rate, double, triple-digit growth across emerging markets. That's changing the nature of global commerce, global businesses. 10, 20 years ago, China was not a superpower. Now it's a totally different conversation. And we're seeing rapid growth across emerging markets, given the influx of technology. A lot of them are leapfrogging essentially what we know today as the basis and going into what's next in the future. And all of these things are coming together to actually influence and impact what commerce looks like in future for us. How do we do business? How do we engage customers? How do we attract the right people? This is changing how we do business today. Governments are more involved in digital. Governments are involved in data protection. They are looking at rules and regulations that actually are seeking to, in some cases, break up the technology hold of the large-scale players. And why is that? Because a lot of money that's being made in tech today is built off of data, oftentimes consumer data, right? So consumer protection becomes a key part of the conversation as well. And we at Mastercard, we pay a lot of attention to that. We actually just talked about our data privacy rules. We believe very strongly that consumers should own their data, consumers should control their data, and consumers should know who is using their data. But today we really don't know that, right? So these are the things that are shaping the future, and we anticipate that as these things start getting more ingrained, and we start seeing more hacks and more risk permeating into the system, it will influence or change fundamentally how the market operates. So if we were to take a step back and look at tech in the 2010s, essentially the bulk of technology has been about connectivity and access. So most of the innovation in the last 10 years has largely been about providing access or providing connectivity. So think about it from the range of, the big names in the world. It's about Uber. It's about, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Alibaba, whether it's, Mercado Libre. A lot of those players essentially just providing access and connectivity to the consumers, to the marketplace. So we see a lot of high penetration of mobile. APIs are a big part of the fundamentals of the last 10 years. IoT, essentially the connectivity of things. There are millions of devices now connected. Projection is that would range into the 80 billion thereabout in the next 5 to 10 years. Social media is a big part of this. It was actually one of the fundamental pieces of it, with Facebook and the likes penetrating into that space. DLT, essentially that's blockchain, was also in the last 10 years, but that's essentially version 1, because blockchain, when it started out, was largely about Bitcoin and the likes. But in the next wave, we'll see a lot of separation between blockchain technology and the currency itself, because they're not exactly the same. Other big things that happened in the last 10 years is big data, AR, VR. All those things are impacting how people interact with their world. But at the end of the day, these things are still at very early stages. Mobile is advanced, social media is advanced, APIs are well advanced. IoT is still at very early stages. Blockchain is still at very early stages. AR, VR are actually still very rudimentary in nature, right? But as the years goes on, we'll start discovering that technology builds on each other, and the more advanced it gets, the better, right? And the example I like to give is, imagine if you wanted to get an Uber, like say 5, 10 years ago, on maybe dial-up or 2G internet, you would have to wait forever to actually even be able to connect to a driver. But now that we have 3G, 4G, it has enabled that. And then as we move into the next wave of technology, we believe it's going to be all about intelligence and autonomy. And what do I mean by that, right? And I've highlighted a couple of these, but we've started talking about AI over the last decade. But AI is just at the early stages. What we're seeing about the power of AI is much more potent than what it is today. Essentially, we believe that in the future, beyond connectivity and beyond access, what is going to drive the future is autonomy and embedding intelligence in various things. The other big thing that we'll also talk about is 5G. But let me talk about blockchain. Quantum computing is an interesting one as well that a lot of people have talked through as a scary potential. But we don't see quantum computing happening in the next 5 years, because that's a large-scale implementation. Probably will be in the next 10 years. But the thing about quantum computers is that the power of quantum computers actually exceeds the best supercomputers we have today. I sat in a lab, one of our labs, and we were testing out running simulations of quantum computing. And the experiment was a simple one. We're supposed to all pick 7-digit, 7-character passwords. There were about 20 of us in a room. And then we're supposed to run the simulation through the quantum computer and bring it back to see if the computer can actually guess our passwords. By the time we did this, we all came up with the complex passwords that we could get, XYZ, 1, 2, 3, 4, asterisk, asterisk, put all the capital letters in there. When we ran this through the simulation, literally everybody's computer passwords were unlocked in a space of 9 seconds. And they said that was actually just because it's a simulation and it's much slower than what would actually be. The reason being, a quantum computer is able to permutate every possible combination of your character codes in microseconds. So it doesn't really matter what password you have. With a quantum computer, it becomes obsolete, right? So we're starting to look at the future. How do we then look at cryptography if quantum computers have the potential to actually break this, right? But at the same time, we also looked at a different simulation that was done at MIT. So this is a basic one around heads or tails. So they play the heads or tail game. Statistically speaking, it should be 50-50. So you would guess heads or tail. So we did it with a basic computer. The computer picked heads or tail, and we guessed in the room. And then the rendering was that, look, 40% of people got it right, 60% got it wrong with a supercomputer. But with a quantum computer, literally nobody got it correct, because there's something in quantum computing called quantum uncertainty, which means that it's neither heads or tail, but at the same time, it's also heads and tail. So there's really no way to get it correct, right? So the fear that quantum computing brings in the ability to break passwords and the likes, it also brings the power to protect our future. And the reason why I started with quantum computing is if you think about the amount of data that will be created over the next 5 to 10 years, you would need serious levels of computing power to actually secure our systems, to secure the commerce ecosystem. So artificial intelligence is actually a big one, like we talked about. It's the humanization of everything, or rather the superhumanization of everything, right? So right now we're seeing a bit of it around marketing, we're seeing a bit of it around personalization, but then it's just the early stages, right? There are things coming into play that we're looking at, people are actually looking at, something called affective computing, which is essentially the computer is able to read your mood or actually manipulate your mood based on your expression on your face, right? Marketers are starting to use this actually to say, look, how can we predict people's interests just by observance, right? So it's starting to actually get much more personal, much more human. There's another notion of cognification, which is essentially embedding intelligence in things, right? So almost saying, like the stage, for example, could actually adjust its own size based on the weight of people on the stage. It could actually lever itself or up or down. Same thing goes with things like helmets and gear and wear. So we're seeing people actually extending the power of artificial intelligence beyond just the personalization that we've seen today to things like hyper-personalization or day zero personalization, like they call it. And day zero personalization is interesting to us in commerce because that means from the very first time I log into a site anew, it already shows me exactly what I want. It knows what I like, it knows what I want because there's an identity to me that has actually been gathered. So when I log into Amazon, for example, it'll be very different from what you see when you log in because it knows, my sizes, it knows everything. So it actually customizes everything from scratch. And that same thing goes into commerce, goes into other things as well as payments. Going to 5G, that's the next wave of essentially technology. We call this the accelerator as far as we're concerned. Now, 5G is not a technology that you can see, feel, touch necessarily, but the speed that it brings to commerce is what we're very focused on, right? So with the volume of data that's going to be coming through, whether it's through IoT, the devices, the sensors, and the likes, the troves of data will need high-speed connectivity, essentially. So there's something we love when you're downloading a file, maybe you have those large files and you click it and then it's loading and those spinners. Essentially the promise of 5G is those spinning does not exist anymore. So essentially you blink is what they call it, it's like the blink rule. Once you click a link, the page opens, it's like you're flipping a page. Now, why does this matter to commerce? If you think about it, most people don't want to wait for a site to load. So generally commerce today we know loses about 15% to site speed. That 15% will be returned, and people that actually have no interest in shopping will discover that it's actually much faster to shop online or shop on their mobile than do anything else. 5G is projected to actually deliver about 5 trillion thereabout in the next 5 years. But over the next 10, 15 years, we expect about 12 trillion thereabout in value to be delivered. And then connecting everything to everything else is a big part of 5G. The number of connection points, the number of node points, we expect that to increase. So literally everything will be connected, and this will be enabled by 5G. The last one that I'll talk about is robotics, right? We tend to not talk a lot about robotics because it seems very futuristic. I don't know if folks here watch Black Mirror. Does anyone watch Black Mirror here? Yeah, so that show is both scary and exciting at the same time, right? So when Black Mirror first came out, it just is like a very futuristic, tech-heavy show. And we saw some robots that were just going around shooting down people and watching people and, being used for, security missions and the likes. It looked very futuristic, but the truth is those things actually exist today, right? There are labs that are actually creating those things for consumer, for enterprise or industry usage, right? So where art meets life is what we're starting to see with robotics. Now, when we think of robotics, we should not think about it like, well, I know we have a picture of a robot playing a piano, but it's a little more than that, right? So there are cleaning devices that we have all over the place that, that essentially do the cleaning in our homes. But the projection is that these will become more personal devices that you can essentially send on errands potentially, right? And we're seeing that in some campuses remotely. And I got an opportunity to actually visit one of these campuses in Austin. And it's so funny that the kids on campus actually use these little robots already. So essentially, they'll put a textbook in them and send it to their friend in a different dormitory. Pizza delivery guys are already using that as well, where you order pizza and the little robot comes to your door and it pings you, and then you scan your phone and grab your pizza. Now, the projection is that in the next 5 to 10 years, the price of these individual personal robots would actually drop. And we've imagined a future where you go into a store, if you happen to go into a physical store, you would actually find a line of robots waiting to pick up goods for people to take back home for them, right? It's a future that we're seeing that's coming with the price drop in robotics. So essentially, let's just talk about the future of commerce, right? So what are the things we're seeing at Mastercard? What are the projections we have for the future? And I'll go through this really quickly. So today, we're at about 15%, 16% of total commerce being digital. The expectation is that by 2030, that would be about 50%, because the growth rate of digital commerce is actually twice the speed of actual commerce itself. A lot of this growth is coming from mobile, fundamentally, but a lot of it is actually increasing the per capita of individuals that are already spending on commerce, right, on digital commerce. So those that do digital commerce transactions today will essentially stare totally to almost like 80, 90%. I recently moved apartments, like in New York, I moved uptown a little further up, and this is not a joke. I was trying to refurnish. I literally bought everything in my home online. I didn't see a single item in person. I have a picture of the boxes that were stacked all the way to the roof. But that's me, and I'm not abnormal because most people actually do the same type of shopping. Interestingly, one of my nieces and nephew, when my mom said, oh, let's go to the store, he was looking at her confused, like, why are you going to the store, ma? Because they're not used to it. They don't even want to go there. All they know is click and drop. And that has actually led me into problems these days because with Alexa, I ran into bills of about $150 last week from the little one just saying, Alexa, deliver popcorn. Alexa, deliver this book. And Alexa will deliver these things, unfortunately. So anyway, we see a lot of growth coming in commerce, and these are the places we see the growth, right? So one, we anticipate that 70% of digital commerce in the future will come from platforms and aggregators. So if you think about the aggregation space, like the Amazons of the world, people that platforms that are not selling single products to single types of individuals, but platforms that actually have a range of products and services that serve multiple segments of the market. We are seeing a congregation and an accelerated congregation of consumers to such platforms. So people that are playing in the commerce space tend to want to see what niche can we build for ourselves that will serve multiple segments, multiple markets, and multiple needs. So 70% of commerce we expect to come through platforms. That's why we partner, we enable a lot of these platforms, and as you as marketers as well, the alignment starts to drive towards platforms, as you know. The other possible future, I think I talked about this a little bit, is voice. So we see voice swelling to about 300 billion a year globally in commerce, right? And this is not just about the young people, it's also about the old, right? And it's also about the bottom of the pyramid folks, people that are actually uneducated. I spent some time actually out in Nairobi the other day, and I discovered that people actually find it easier to speak than to type, because even if you're not educated and you can't write, you can speak, right? So voice commerce is going to be a big factor in what drives the future. Of course, there are considerations around security, protocols, and things like that are yet to be established, but that's a big part. And the last point to raise here is that 50%, over 50% of all in-store transactions will be frictionless. So right now we know about the one-tap payment, but that's going to go away. That will become obsolete soon, right? Where it comes to things like paying by self, where you walk into a store and you walk out with whatever you want. So similar to what Amazon Go is doing, that's essentially the future we're anticipating. Essentially doing nothing checkout. So that's the biometrics coming into play. So those are the big things we see in the future. Now the question is, so how do we prepare ourselves for this? The prediction is hard. Predictions are hard. Well, how do you prepare yourself for it? I think I'll skip over digital. I always talk about that. I think the main way of doing this, if you think about the quote from Jeff Bezos, it says, I'm a big believer that there are a lot of little things that will be connected to the internet. But rather than just believing it, he actually went ahead and created these home devices. Ray Kurzweil talks about personal computers, right? Essentially predicting that, look, watches, all that stuff, everything will be connected. Right now we have earrings that actually pay, we have ring bands. This ring actually can pay for things. All those things will start getting embedded. But the main thing is that he went ahead and proposed that. And one of my favorites is actually Elon, that says in the next 7 to 10 years, first humans will colonize Mars. I don't know if that's true or not, but he's actually going ahead to actually do something about it. So we like to wrap this up and just say, look, the best way to predict the future is actually do something to create it. And that's what we're trying to do here at Mastercard. Thanks for having me, and I'll leave you to the rest of the day.